Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Postman one-on-one webinar. I'm seeing a lot of places going through the chat from all around the world. I'm myself in London, so hello from here. We've got other people on the line. We've got a few Postman teammates that can help all along, but let's get it started. So my name is Arlemi. I'm a developer advocate at Postman. My main job is to help you make the best use of Postman. So it's not just about telling you what to do, but it's about knowing what you're doing with Postman and showing you how to do it the best way. You can find me on Twitter at Arlemi. And strangely, I seem to be the only one with that name. So if you just Google me, you'll find me everywhere. A few housekeeping rules. There will be Q&A at the end. There's a Q&A section at the bottom of your screen, I believe, where you can ask all the questions. My colleagues are monitoring that during the webinar, but I'll be looking at other questions at the end as well and answering the leftover ones. This session is recorded and it will be sent to all attendees at the end. And I think that's about it. My voice is breaking. Okay, so let's hope it's not breaking for everyone. I'm guessing with everyone's internet, there will be a different situation, but hopefully, okay, just put it on the side. Cool. So this session, it will be an hour long. And let's start by welcoming you all. You're probably all new to Postman. This webinar invitation has been sent to all the new users or new registered users from the last 2 months. So I'm guessing you've either been using Postman for years without creating an account, or you didn't know about Postman and just created an account, or you just happened to land on our registration page and created an account. But at the end of the day, you're here today, and we'd like to welcome every one of you to Postman and to this webinar. What are we going to do today? There will be 5 main things we'll go through. First, we'll talk about what is Postman in general, because again, if you're one of these person that just stumbled upon a registration page, you may not know what Postman is about and what to do with it. So I'll go quickly through the basics of what you can do with Postman and what it's known for. I'll then move into getting started with Postman, giving you an overview of the app and how to send a request, what's a collection, what's the API builder, and this kind of stuff. Next, on to tips and tricks. We've had a lot of people, our own users, as they were learning about Postman, they taught us some stuff, or they showed us how they were doing some things the right way or a better way than we were thinking. And I'll share that with you. So when you get started with Postman, you'll probably save some time and it's just going to help you in general with your workflow. We'll finish with resources, just general where to look for help, where to find documentation, where's the community living, if you find a bug, because sometimes there's bugs, where to report it, and this. To finish, Q&A. Again, as I said, there's a Q&A going on throughout the whole webinar. You can find the link at the bottom of your screen, somewhere here. Click on it, ask your question. Either you'll be replied to during the webinar or it will be left for the end and I'll get to the answers at the end. Okay. This session will be a lot of demoing. So there's going to be a few slides just to remind you what we're going to be talking about, but I spend most of the time in the app. Simply because I believe that's probably the best way for you to understand. Instead of me trying to talk you through what's in the app, I'll just show you and click around to demonstrate what you can do with the app. This is a background from the office, as you may have noticed, or as I've seen some people notice, and this will make even more sense as we go through the demonstration. Cool. What is Postman? Postman started as a quick project that was shared on Stack Overflow to just test APIs, and it grew in an API development platform that is now used by 10 million people. Most of our users are still using that to simply code an endpoint, see if that works. If it works, cool, move on to the next thing. But it also grew as a collaboration platform. API first design is now a thing. There's a lot of people starting with API design or like sharing API, and the API business is growing. And you can use Postman for that to collaborate on API as a team and just to help you build, test, deploy, design APIs as a whole. And this is Postman in a nutshell. So let's get started. I'll already jump into the app and show you what's a workspace, what's a collection, and what's the API builder. Oop. Okay, so maybe now my background makes even more sense. For those of you who know the office, today I'll be Michael Scott, and I'll be using Postman for the first time. So when you open Postman for the first time, this is where you land. You're welcomed by a launchpad that tells you good afternoon, good morning, whatever the time is, and tells you a few actions that you can do and leads you to lesson. We'll go into that later, but I want to take a step back and just look at the interface. So this is your workspace. This whole square thing is your workspace. And you can look at the top. I'm currently living in my workspace, and I could use that tab switcher to move to my team workspace if I wanted to collaborate, but I'll stick to my personal workspace. So now I'm in my workspace, and a workspace, it's split it in two views. You have a build view where you can create your API calls, whether it get, post, or whatever. And then you have a browse where you just want to look at your resources. So I'll go quickly into browse just so you get familiar with it, because we have a few users that land on that page and actually don't know how to switch back to build. So that page is where you can see all your different resources, whether it's APIs, collections, history, environments. So you see some stuff here because obviously I've been prepping for that webinar, and you see some stuff in activity as well. So let's switch back to build. The build is split in three sections. The navbar, where you can create new content, import, or use the collection runner. The sidebar, as we call it, where you can switch from history, collections, and API. And then you have the main work area. Let's have a look at collections. The collection is a set of requests organized by folder or not, up to you. And that's how you organize your work in Postman. So for the sake of this webinar, I'll create a new collection and I'll call it webinar. Give it a description, which is going to be, this is my demonstration collection for the Postman one-on-one webinar. All right, so now as you can see on the sidebar, I now have a folder where I can add requests to it, or I could add new folders to organize. And I'm only going to use that collection during the webinar, and that's what we're going to look at. But before that, let's switch quickly to the API tab. The API tab is what we call the API builder, where you can design an API straight from Postman. We're not going to go, deep dive into that. There's a webinar later on this month that is going to go into that. But just so you know, you can design and generate collections from API schema straight from the API builder. If you'd like to have a look later on, you can navigate to the API tab and click on this lesson, which will lead you through creating an API and creating new API elements for it. Okay, let's switch back to collection. That's it for what is a workspace and what's in a workspace. Now let's get into creating requests. So I have my collection webinar and I'll now add a request. And this request is going to be get request example. I've created my new request and I can now see it under my folder. I'll click on it and this is the request view. There's different places here that you can have a look at, the name of the request at the top. And if I click on that, I can have a description of it. The send bar, I guess, where you would put the endpoint URL and click send when you would like to send it. The parameters, whether it is params authorization. So if you have an API that requires login, whether it is with an API key, OAuth, or anything, you can do it through here. Headers. So there are headers that you could add to a request. A body, if you're thinking about a post or put request, you can add something to the body, and then tests. We'll look at that later. So let's go ahead and add an URL. So Postman Eco is an API test endpoint that you can use and created by us that you can use to test out Postman basically, or just see if you can send a request. So I've put my endpoint, and I'll click send to send my request. As you can see, some stuff happened at the bottom. So this is the response window where whenever you send a request, the result will be shown here. Here I can see it was okay. So the request was successfully sent. It took 206 milliseconds to be sent. And I have the split between what happened during that call. And then I have the size of my request, which is 813 bytes. All right, so looking a bit further into the response window, I can see that I have different tabs. A pretty view, which basically just syntax highlights your content. So if you were to have XML here, you could select XML here and it would format as XML, but we have JSON, so I'll stick to JSON. You have a raw view. So if you actually don't like when it's prettified, just go straight for the raw view. You have a preview tab, which basically is an HTML view of your page, and visualizer. So again, this is a bit more advanced, and there's resources for that on the web. Cool. So that was a simple request. I'll switch back to the slides just so we can follow up where we are. So we've done send a request, get, post. Let's move on to the post. All right, let me switch my page here as well. Cool. So I've created a get request. Now I'm going to go ahead. I've got my collection here, and I can click a few more actions and add a request. This one is going to be a post request. Oop. Going to the request, I'm going to change the method. And as you can see here, there's plenty. So get, post, put, patch, delete. This is all of the HTTP default ones. You can edit it yourself. You don't have to select. I could just go here and write post, and that would do the same thing. So again, I'm going to go ahead and hit the Postman API, but this time I'll set post. If I send it, same thing. I can see there's a response coming back, but this time there's data. So what you do with a post request, usually you add a body and you send data over. So let's go ahead and see how we can add a body to a request. You can move to the body tab of your request and say, I'm going to add a row body, and this is going to be JSON. So let's go ahead and add something here. I'm going to create a new user, which is going to have a name. And his name is going to be Michael Scott. And we'll give him an age. And I don't want to be rude, so I'll go with 40, probably. All right, let's do that. Cool. I will save my request. So I can either do that by just pressing the usual Control S or Command S, or I can go here and say, oh, actually not here. It's here, save. Right. So I've saved my request, and now I'll send it. Let's go ahead and see what's in the response. Now I can see data was sent over, and I've got my user and a name and an age. Okay, cool. Okay. All right, so that's how to add a body to a post request. There's other type of parameters that you can add. The most known ones are query parameters and path parameters. So let's see how we can add these ones as well. To do so, I'll just roll back to my get request on the left, and I will add a param. So as you can see here, I've got query parameters, and I'll add a param, which is, let's say, ID. As you can see, as I write the param here, it's being added to the URL already. And if I add a value, let's say I have an ID of 55, again, you can see it's populated directly here. Another type of parameters is called path parameters. So let's say I had another param here, could be path or path. This, writing something like this, will also already be pre-populated here for me, and I can edit it from here. You can see there's now a path variable section, and I can say path equals random. All right, let's send this. This time, what am I seeing is a 404 not found. And that makes sense because I've actually edited the path, and this is not an actual path from this endpoint. So let's go ahead and remove the path and send again. This works. 200 OK, and I'm saying I've got an argument which is ID of 55. If you'd like to toggle on or off the parameters, you don't have to go ahead and edit this. You can just click here and it turns it off and off. So send it, no arguments. All right, let's go back to the slides. We've sent a request, we've done get post. I'm not going to go through put and delete. They're pretty much the same, just changing the method and sending data or just sending a delete command. We've looked at adding parameters. And now let's look at testing request. This is how Postman was born, basically, testing endpoints. So just quickly, I can see a question about showing multiple parameters. I'm just quickly going to show that. Let's say I have 2 query parameters. One is ID, one is name, and my name is going to be Michael again. You can see they're all being added here with the ampersand character. And if I send it, I've got an ID and a name. All right. So now what we can do with tests, there's two types of scripts. You can use pre-request script and test. Let's first look at test. If you go through this tab, we're trying to make it easy for you that you don't have to write everything by hand, and we give you snippets by default. If you do not see this, it may be because your resolution is too small, or you've just clicked here and it doesn't show. So you can come here, click that little arrow, and it's going to show the snippets. The usual things people test when they call their API, is it up? So can I call that endpoint? Is it giving me a 200 OK? Or is it giving me a 404? Is it giving me an error? And I can test that by simply going here and clicking this snippet. Status code is 200. So what we're using here is a JavaScript library called chai.js. And this is how you write test. Basically, like you would write assertions in like normal English. I expect my response, so the response from the API, to have a status of 200. Let's go ahead and send this. Okay, now I have a new tab here, which if I click on, will show me the test that passed or that failed. So remember when I changed the path, it actually gave me a 404. So let's do that again and say, let's try to call that endpoint. Now if I send this, and if I go ahead and look at my test, this is going to tell me fail. And it's going to tell me the expected response was to have 200, but we actually got 404. So this endpoint does not work. Cool. So that's one of the tests you can do. There's many here. You could test the value check. You could check if there's a header, if you could check the response time. Let's actually check the value. So rolling back to my post request, where what I was adding is a body of a user who has a name of Michael Scott and an age of 40. I could test whether the age is higher than 21, for example. So let's go ahead to my test. And again, you know, I don't like writing from scratch. So I'll just go here and say JSON value check. So as you can see, I'm creating a new test, and I'll call it check if age is higher than 21. Here, I'm getting the response JSON, which is basically what we have here. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to get my data, and it's going to be value.data. So I'm going down my JSON here. So it's value.data.user.age. Value.data.user.age to be above 21. I'll save and I'll send that request. And now let's look at my tests. Okay, cannot read property data of undefined. So looks like I've made a mistake. Let's go ahead and debug that. Saying it's not recognizing data. It's because we don't need that value actually. So I'll send again. And now I can go to my test result and it says, I've passed the test, which is check if age is higher than 21. All right. So that's using test in Postman. If you had a lot of endpoints, you could add many tests in the same one, and I can actually add other ones here. And if I add status code is 200 and response time is less than 200 milliseconds and send this, now in my test, I can see that I passed 3 tests. There are ways to automate these tests, but again, we're not going to go deep dive into that because this is really a Postman one-on-one, and there are other webinars that we'll do around testing. Okay, there's this tab that we've not looked at yet, the pre-request script. What does this allow you to do? Well, the name kind of says it already. It's before you request, you can execute a script. And this allows you to do things like generating variables on the fly. Let's say I want to put as a parameter the current date. Instead of always going to my parameters and saying date equals 27 of May, what I can do is go into my pre-request script and actually set it from here. So let's go ahead and use that. I'm going to use, just like I did in the test tab, the PM API, which allows me to do stuff like pm.variables.set, which takes 2 parameters. One is the number of the variable, which I think I call date, and then the value. And we just say new date. So now what this says is I'll set a new variable called date with the value of new date. And if I send this and looked at the result here, oh, it did not work. Why didn't it work? It's because it's not variable, it's environment, I believe. And again, that's why you need to prep even more before a webinar. Let's see. Okay, give me a sec. Have my cheat sheet next to me and I'll just have a look quickly. Interesting. This is probably the live demo effect. Pretty sure I tried that before and it worked. Okay, so let's go ahead and say, you shall believe me. I'm seeing some people trying to help me and it's very nice. Environment was spelled wrong. Bidam Murphy. Yeah. Okay, I can go back to that later. Let's roll back to the slides. So I've showed you test scripts. Unfortunately, I didn't show you pre-request scripts because somehow I was not able to get that to work. But we'll see that at the Q&A at the end, and I can spend some time just trying to look at that. I don't want to waste too much time on this. So I've showed you the demo. Now, next, tips and tricks. As I was telling you, there's a lot of people using Postman, and they all come with creative ways to use Postman. And we come up with functionalities that help them use Postman. And we hope that they will be able to help you as well. There's 4 things I'm going to go through: environment variables, code generations, collaboration, and settings, including dark theme, because we like dark theme. Let's go ahead and look at the environment variables. As you can see here, for example, what I was trying to do was hard code the value of my variables, the ID and the name, for example, which was 55 and Michael. Well, to make it easier to work with that, you don't have to go into your request and change them. There's different type of variables you can use. And one of them is called environment variables. So what this does is it creates an environment with a set of variables and value associated to those variables. And you can set the value here. So I'll go ahead and say, this is going to be an ID, and this is going to be a name. I'll create a new environment now. Let me just go back quickly through that. So if I go at the top here, I can see that there's no environment selected. If I use the quick look, I can see that there's no active environment. And I can go here and click add environment. So I'll call this one webinar env. And I had two variables. So one called ID and one called name. I'll set a value of ID to 55 and a name of Michael. You can see here there's two different values. One is called initial value, and this one is shared with your team. So if you were in a team setting, which is what I'm going to talk about later, they would be able to see that value. And you have a current value. This current value is not shared with anyone, and it's just in your workspace. So if you have any API key to put here, you can put it here. All right, so let's go ahead and create that environment. Now I have it created. The next thing I need to do is click in here and select my environment. As I do this, you can see that the color of this variable changed from red to orange. And now these variables actually resolve to the value. So when you add a variable, what it does, it's going to check at the different scope of variables and see if there's one that corresponds to this variable name. So it's going to check the collection variable, because you can have variables at the collection level. It's going to check the environment variable, and it's going to check the global variables, which are global to your whole workspace. So if I send this, now I can see to my body, it sends the same. So what this allows you to do, it allows you to quickly switch from different environments. Let's say you have a production environment and a test environment. You could go ahead and create a second environment, which would be webinar test environment. And this one would have an ID of 100 and a name of test Michael. Now that I've done this, I can quickly switch from one to the other. And instead of having to switch all variables manually, just switching the environment at the top is going to change the value everywhere. So speaking of testing environments and authorization, that's one thing I've not touched to yet. You've got a tab which is called authorization, and APIs or endpoints in general have many ways to identify you. And these go from API key to AWS signature to OAuth 2.0, etc. So we have a lot of them that are already here out of the box. And let's say I wanted to use an API key. I can just go here and select API key. And it's going to tell me, so this was already here pre-filled because I did that before the webinar. But I could just say my API key is here. The value is API 123456789. And I can add that to either the query params or the header. So let's do the query params. And let's use the knowledge we just got about environment variables. This could be API key. And because I've created that variable, now I can add this to my environment and change the API key that is sent to the request every time I switch environment. So I'm going to have a quick look at my environment and edit it. And I can add an API key value, a variable with a value of test 123456. And now I can multiply this one as well. And I'm going to add an API key with value of env3456. All right, so sending that request now, as you can see, it resolves and turned to orange. We'll show an API key of this value. If I switch to my production environment, let's say, and it's going to just say env123456. Okay. Let's go back to the slides. So we've looked at environment variables, and the tip here is, as much as you can, use variables, whether it is collection variables, environment variables, or global variables maybe, because it just makes it easier to work with your team and to switch from environment to one to the other, instead of hard coding stuff and not remembering what is where, what is in the query param, what is in the path param, where was your API key stored. You can just do that all through variables. The next one is code generation. This one is, or at least what I'm hearing is that it saves lives. Basically, I've created a request here and I'm quite happy with it. But now the next step is, well, this API works, but I need to write that in my app. And I need to call that endpoint from my app, whether it is front end, a Node.js backend, curl, or whatever. Well, you have this small code button here that you'll find on every request. And if you click on it, you get the actual code of that request for all these languages. So whether you're a C# developer, Go developer, a Node.js, or PHP, Python, I'm not going to go through them all, but there's a lot of them here. You can just click on all of these, and it actually creates the code for you and generates it. So all you have to do is click copy. And once it's copied, just paste it on your app, basically. So we use that a lot. Every project now that I work with, because most of the time you want to get, if you want to try an API, you see and check how it works, what data it returns. So I'll start with Postman. And once I've done that, just go here, Node.js, copy and paste in my Node.js server or Node.js Express, and done. So, yep, I'm seeing I'm seeing some wild reactions on the chat, which is what we usually get with that. It's very small. It's just hidden here, but it's very useful. So make sure that you click on that and use that. It's going to save you a lot of time. Maybe not lives, but at least time. All right. Let's talk about collaboration. As I was talking at the very beginning, Postman grew into a collaboration platform where people use it to share internally in a team, but also externally. So we'll look at these two. As I showed you at the beginning, you have different workspaces. When you create an account, you'll have a personal workspace, but you'll also be able to create a team workspace. So obviously, Michael's got my team workspace called Dada Mifflin, so I can go ahead here and invite people. So this works exactly the same, but the difference is that I can have colleagues on that same workspace that I work in here. And if you can look here, I have Dwight Schrute, Jim Alpert, and Pam Beasley, as well as all my other colleagues that are here. They're inactive though, they're not really working a lot, but they're here and I can create new content and they'll be able to access it. So let's create a new collection and say collab with the office. Another request, which is going to be a sample request. We'll put a dummy endpoint like we did before and save that request. So I've saved it, there's nothing here. If I switch to Dried Fruit, which is on that same, so first I can see that Michael's code was active, and you could see that this just appeared. So what Michael's code created, I can also access it and I can edit it. And let's say I want to add a parameter. I can add an ID of 1 and save it. And this, if I roll back to the other account, I will be seeing this as well. And just like that, you can collaborate. And let's say now I have, or Dwight has a collection in his personal workspace that he would like to share with the team. Let's say to be shared, and create a random request. I'll have this one called google.com and save that. What I can do here, once I'm happy with my work on my personal workspace, can go ahead and share the collection. And just from here, I can share it to the Dunder Mifflin team for other people to access, or I can generate a code for a website and put it on the outside, or I can just get a public link, which is going to create a snippet of that collection for people to import in their own. Let's go ahead and share it to the workspace. Click share and continue. So it's been shared. And now what it says is I'm able to select who should be able to do what on this collection. So I've got all my colleagues, and I can say everyone's an editor, or, well, don't really like Jim. So Jim could be a viewer. But this is something that is only for a paid plan. All right, so save roles. And now I will roll back to my team workspace. And I can see that to be shared is here. So is collab with the office. So that's the way you can work with your colleagues. You have your team workspace, everyone is on there, everyone participates and share stuff in that workspace. Let me move back to Michael Scott. So that's internally. But what about the people out there that you want to share your API with and you want them to be able to use your API? Well, so my team has created that beautiful collab with the office collection, and I'm happy with that. And I think it's ready for people outside of my team to use. Different ways to do that. I can go here and click share. Now what we want to do is either embed or get public link. That's what I showed you, but there's a way to actually generate documentation for you. And that's another one that you may not be aware of, but actually will save you a lot of time. If you click view in web, this actually generates a whole API documentation for you. And that includes the name of the request, the parameters, as well as code samples for everyone outside to use. So once I'm happy with, let's call this my public collection. And I will add a description. This is a request that doesn't do much, but we like it anyway. All right, once I'm happy with my documentation here, I can publish. I can style it. I could change the color of the background header, the code background color, the highlight color. And then you have two options. You've got add to API network and add to Postman templates. The API network, and I'll talk about that later, is where you want to put your production APIs. And we have a lot of publishers out there, just like SurveyMonkey or Box and other ones. And Postman template is basically where anyone in the community can publish. So obviously, I don't want to pollute the API network with that. So I'll go ahead and publish to the templates. So I've got my team. I'll say quick summary and a simple description. Obviously, if you go ahead and do that, make sure that you have stuff that makes sense here. You don't want to just put this. Publish, proceed and publish. Oops, something went wrong. I'll just click publish again, because that's what we do. Click publish twice and it works. All right, so this is published, and now I can see my listing is published at this link. And I can just go ahead, copy that link and share it with anyone for them to see my collection and consume it. They can either click run in Postman, and this will open Postman and import the collection, or they can view the documentation. And this is the view that I showed you earlier, which is my public collection, the request, documentation, and the example here. Cool. So that's for collaboration. Let's go back to the slides. Dark theme. I'm not going to go full screen. I'm just going to go straight for that because that's the moment everyone is waiting for. The dark theme. At the top here, you've got a few icons. This one is the interceptor, and we can look at that in more details later on. But we have this one, which gives you access to the settings. like any app, there's plenty of settings. You've got settings about your headers, about the user interface, if you want to change the font size, show icons, enable the launchpad, etc. And you can go ahead and there's a lot of stuff in there that you can change, but you also have themes, and you can just switch to the dark theme. Instantly, your eyes are thanking you. Cool. Other stuff in here, if you have certificates on your server that need to be provided, you can add them here. If you have a specific proxy that needs to be set up for accessing your API, you can set up here. And obviously you have the update tab where you can check for updates. The last one is 7.25. So if you have this, you're up to date. Cool. This time, let's go back to the slide. Right, tips and tricks. We're done with that. There's obviously plenty more, but now I'm going to tell you where you can actually find more information about all of this. Okay, resources. 3 things in here. In-app bootcamp, which I'm going to give you a tour right now. Support center, which is what I call the mother of all links, and the API network. So what's the in-app bootcamp? If you go back to your app and you go to the bottom here next to the build and browse views switcher, you can click on bootcamp. Bootcamp are in-app lessons that actually teach you how to do specific tasks on Postman. So because I don't have time to go through all of these specific actions, I can only highly recommend to go through that after the webinar and do pretty much all of them there. Probably 5-minute long each, and they're very easy to use. So if you click on, for example, designing and mocking APIs, you can learn the design API, and it's going to tell you exactly what to do. So first is importing a collection. So I'm going to click ahead and import, then opening the collection, and then you can see status. So you're 5% in the lesson, and just in case you need to run and do something else, you can end the lesson and then go back to it later. So that's the in-app bootcamp. It's going to teach you a lot of stuff that I was not able to touch on this webinar. So again, highly recommend that you go in there. The other thing I want to talk about is the support center. So postman.com/support. You'll find basically everything you need in here. First and foremost, documentation, which we call the learning center. Anything you want to do on Postman, or at least we hope, is documented with images, text, anything you would like to help you go through it. So you can go to that link, click explore the docs, and there's everything here. So any question, start with the docs. It's a great point to start. There's everything here. Second, if you were not able to find your answer in the documentation, or if you have a specific use case that you're not sure how to go along with, reach out to the community. So the Postman community lives at community.postman.com. And there's us, so Postman employees, as well as community members that take part in here and are sharing whether what they like to do or how they use Postman, or just help people in general to use Postman, as well as posting Postman news. So for example, what is new in the latest version of Postman, or Postman events. So go here and take part in the community, engage with us. We'd like to hear about what you're doing with Postman. Next, bugs or feature requests. Postman has a lot in there. And because it's such a big software, well, we're not safe from bugs. There's a bug here, a bug there. If you find one, go ahead, go on GitHub and report a bug. If you happen to use Postman and feel like something is missing from the workflow and you have a feature request to offer, same. Go to GitHub, create a new issue, and let us know what you'd like to see in Postman. Last but not least, Postman roadmap. We have had a lot of feature requests, and we see have a lot that are there. And we let everyone know on our public roadmap what's happening. So everything that's been released this year, near term, so anything that's going to come up in the next month, so in the future 2 release, midterm, in the next quarter, and then planning stuff we don't have a date for. If you're interested in what's coming up for Postman, highly recommend checking that link. It's going to tell you all about it. All right. If, and only if, you were not able to find your answer in any of these, go ahead and submit a ticket. Actually, I'm saying if and only if, not really. Our support team is very helpful and they're happy to help with anything. If you have just a question which includes some personal data, feel free to reach out to them. If there's a question around pricing, you can reach out to them. Any question that you're not comfortable asking on the community forum, reach out to them. They can help with a lot of stuff, account-specific issues. If you have a bug, you can also send it there and they'll help you and redirect the bug to the right team. Okay, last link, the API network. And that's the one. So when I published the documentation earlier, talking about collaboration, I talked about the API network. In the API network, basically it's companies that have made available pre-made documentation and Postman collections that you can use. So let's say I'd like to use the Yelp API. I can click here and I can see they have an API here. I'm not even going to look at the documentation. I'm just going to click Run in Postman, select Postman for Windows. Oops, it's going to open in the wrong Postman, but it's fine. And what this does, just clicking Open in Postman, creates the collection for me. And here I can see I've got all the endpoints that are here. They're already pre-populated with the different endpoints. If there's headers that need to be set, they're probably already here. So you see this one uses bearer token. Basically makes it much easier for you to use APIs from other businesses. Instead of going to their documentation and trying to recreate the request yourselves, you can just go to the API network and click the Run in Postman button and have it already pre-created. So I've seen quite a few questions about what is that blue icon. Yeah, that's Postman Canary. If you'd like to have access to features before everyone and provide us with some feedback, if you go to the download page of Postman, you can find Postman Canary and download it from there. And they can run in parallel, so feel free to run them. Let's go back to the homepage of the API network. There's many categories: communications, cloud, financial services, health services. I'm not going to go through them all. For example, social medias, we have Twitter. You can go ahead and create a Twitter API straight from there. Yeah, basically, again, one of the things that makes it much easier to use Postman and to create APIs in general. Cool. That was a lot. That's a lot of stuff. Hopefully, I've not lost everyone. I'm seeing we still have more than 1,000 people on the chat, so that's good news. There's much more to Postman. One thing that we do for people that want to learn more about Postman as well, we have weekly streams on Twitch. Twitch is a streaming platform just for gaming or other things, and we're there every Thursday at 7 p.m. GMT, so Greenwich Meridian Time. It's usually a colleague of mine, Joycelyn, and myself streaming, or sometimes we have guests. What we do is an hour, and we just build something from the ground up. So no need for previous knowledge. Just come join us, help us build something. We like to talk with the chat. We like to interact with you and get your input in what we should build. Twitch.tv/getpostman is where we are. Next, I'm seeing a lot of thanks in the chat, and thank you all for sticking along. I know I've talked a lot. I've shown a lot of stuff. Hopefully you were able to follow along. But if you have any feedback, whether it's good or bad feedback, we'd like to hear from it. So that's the URL where you can find the survey for that webinar. Feel free to fill it now while I'll be replying to the Q&A questions, or just save it for later. But we'd like to hear from you and know what you think, what you thought about this webinar. Okay, I'll give it 1 more minute for people to save that link somewhere. bit.ly/Postman survey 4. Okay. And now, before we leave the Q&A, the moment you've all been waiting for, the questions that were unanswered, questions you all want to be answered. Okay, so I can see my colleagues have been hard at work while I was talking to you. They've answered like more than 70 questions already. So I'm guessing a lot of it has already been touched on, but let me go ahead and have a look at it. Okay, first question. Is it possible to mass select or deselect parameters like shown in the get? Let's go ahead and put that in context. I'm just gonna switch back to my personal workspace and my webinar. So the question was, if I'm here, can I bulk select or deselect? You can't from here. You would have to go ahead and click on each of them. But if you go to bulk edit, all your requests are here and you could just go ahead and delete them all, basically. That's probably not exactly what you would like to do, but the best way to deselect everything at once is to change the view and just delete them all. Okay. Next question. Is there an option to change the code convention to put the braces under functions instead of behind them? So I'm guessing this is about if I send a request and I have things here to put braces. So the question is, can I have these braces under here instead of on the same line? Not as of now. We don't have like that fine level editing of syntax highlighting or just prettifying. But if you'd like to have that at some point, go ahead to our GitHub repository and put that as a feature request, and we'll have a look for sure. All right. Can I define endpoint? Very basic question, but a very good question. So that was a question asked half an hour ago. Hopefully that person is still here and I can still answer that. An endpoint is basically when you have an API, this is split in different requests that you can hit or that you can call from your app. And an endpoint is each of these different URL or each of these different options on the API is got an endpoint. So for example, this Postman Eco API has a get endpoint, also has a post endpoint. It has a delete endpoint, etc., etc. Let's go next. Is there any code generation for Spring? I do not believe so. So not for now. If this is not there again, best way to do that, head to our GitHub repository and say, we Spring developers, we want code generators, please. Don't forget the please. We always like cool people that say please. So yeah, that would be my answer. With the copy of the webinar recording, we'll receive transcript from the Q&A. Yes, whenever we publish the webinar afterwards, there's my estimate colleagues that put together a Q&A, and you'll be able to find that as well. Next question. At the moment, I copy paste my values across machines because I have multiple environments for different servers, but having over 20 environments and dozens of servers make copy pasting troublesome. Yeah, that's where definitely you should use the collaboration feature and the team workspaces. If you're on your own and you actually have a Postman account, whatever you do on your account will be synced to your other accounts, whether it is requests, collections, environments. So no need for copy pasting, it's all synced and you can just access it from any machine. Okay. How to send data to system variables, and how to take code for Angular if required. Send data to system variables, I am not sure about the question, so I will skip that one. How to take code for Angular if required. Angular is a JavaScript framework, so I would just get JavaScript fetch, which is the basic one. It's probably not, you probably have to edit some stuff to, for example, if you want to send the response to one of your Angular variable, you'll have to do some code changes here, but you should be able to just use that out of the box. Okay, so I see some big chunks of questions. Can you explain a bit about options we have while sending? Body, row, X, www, right encoded. Okay, so that question is about when I did my post request and added a body to my request. Here at the top, you have different options. So just as when you do a post request from your website, for example, let's say you have a form, one of these is called form data. So if you have a form which is HTML form, I'm talking about, sorry, which is name, address, age, etc. You could replicate that by adding it here. This is basically a different type of body that you can add to your request. Row could be JSON, but could also be HTML, XML, or just text. Binary, if you have a binary file that you want to send. And GraphQL is if you want to actually query a GraphQL API, and you can provide the GraphQL query here. I hope that answered the question. Okay, so let me just have a quick look at what is here. Okay, right. Will there be any follow-up webinars? We do webinars every month or 2 a month. We have one coming up at the end of June about the API builder. We had a series of one around API businesses and just like the whole process of building an API business from scratch. You can find that either on our website, or they're all sent if you subscribe to our newsletter. Arlemi talked about an API webinar. Where can I find information on this webinar? Let me see if I can find this for you. Bear with me for a second and I'll find this. Sorry for the delay. All right, I've got it here for you. That's the webinar. It happens on Wednesday, June 24. I'll be there again. So if you're not bored with me, you can come and say hi. And it's about building better APIs with Postman API Builder. You can find this information on our website, I believe. And if not, you can just post on either the community forum or ask support and I can give you a link to register. All right, more questions. Let's see. Getting data. So this one says getting data through APIs and posting it to my data sheets, OJ Google Sheets. So we have a lot of examples of using the Google API to get data and add it to a Google Sheet. I would recommend going to the API network and looking at the templates. And if you look for Google, you should find a few that are showing you how to use, like for example, integration with Google Drive, this one as well. You'll find example, and if not, post on the community forum. I know Kinlane, one of our colleagues, has done a lot of work with Google Collections and sending data to Google Sheets. So that would be my recommendation. Okay. Okay, so for the June 24th webinar, I think Nikita shared the link in the chat. Yep. Okay, quick question is there going to be a 102? Basically, all the other webinars we do are 102, and they'll like deep dive in a specific topic. This 101 will be run every month. And from next month, we are planning to do an hour-long Q&A the day after, every time we run this webinar, and we'll be sharing that with all of you. Okay, I'll do one last one, which is, can you run through a quick and easy example of doing an API call from something in the API network? Okay, so let's go to the API network. And let's see, I think we should have, okay, so let's look at this one. So we all live on the same planet, and we all have heard about the COVID-19 and what's happening with that. We've actually done some work about gathering data and working with other people that have API around this. And we've worked with that team, Novel COVID, which provide an API for getting data on different countries, states, about the number of cases, the number of recovered cases, etc. So if I look at the documentation, I can see they have different endpoints. They have an endpoint that is all, and an example request and example response. So I can see this is what I'm supposed to get. So the question is, how do I run that in Postman? So I'll go back to the top and click run in Postman again and open in Postman. So now I can see I have a new collection that has been created. I can go ahead, click on the same endpoint, the all, and click send. And I already have the response here. So I didn't have to create anything. I didn't have to set any parameters. I just click run in Postman, import in the collection for me, and send this. I could do this with another one. If I want specific country, I could go here and see what it says. Countries. Oh, specific country. And it says, for this parameter, you can use country name and country ID. Let's say we want France. There I go. I change the parameter and I can see all the results for France. Yeah, that will be all for me. I'll leave you to it. Again, this will be shared with everyone. Feel free to roll back to it. Please try the bootcamp. This will help you a lot with getting started with Postman. It's going to show you all the good stuff. Feel free to reach out, whether it is through the community forum, directly to me on Twitter, to anyone in the Postman team. We're always happy to help. And again, thank you all for attending, and we hope to see you all soon. Bye-bye.